More, mashallah, is really insightful for the intergenerational challenge that we face, especially considering that this is not, you know, we do have entertainments for you, but our first priority here at Awakening is, you know, for you guys to actually hear things and for you guys to grow. So hopefully we're going to have our panelists and they're going to, you know, give you guys some seeds so that they can flourish when you get back home. And that's what it's all about. It's about, it may be shocking, it might be saddening, it might be heartbreaking, some of the things that you guys are hearing, but at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about awakening, kaka'a. So, without further ado, I would like to call Sharmake Abdullahi, who will moderate and introduce our panelists, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Again, I'm quite happy to see everyone here tonight. Just a show of hands. Who's been to Awakening for the first time tonight? This is your first event this year? Amazing. So we have a new group of people that we've engaged, alhamdulillah. For those of you who've come to Awakening in the past, you'll know that we've had a number of panelists and speakers in the past. This year, we tried to switch it up a bit and create a bit of a dialogue to get you guys involved, because we want to honor your time, we want to respect the time that you guys are taking out of your important evening to come here. So we don't want the information to flow one way. So I'll just give you some ground rules for our discussion before I call the panelists up. I'm going to be calling everyone out that's going to be coming on the panel. I'll ask them to join me on the panel right here. I'll introduce them one by one. And then what I hope to do is, inshallah, every person will be given 5 to 7 minutes to kind of get into their topic. Once that's done, we'll open up to the crowd, and I'll be running around like Vanna White with this mic. All right? All right, so please join me in welcoming our 3 panelists. I'll just call them all up before I do their intros. Filson Hujala, please come on up. Bashir Mohammed and Idil Abdul, please come on up. I'm really honored and looking forward to this panel discussion tonight. So first we have Filson Hujala, who's presently a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Education at the University of Ottawa. She's interested in issues related to diversity, identity, power, inequality, and the intersections of different systems of oppression. Her current research explores how second-generation racial immigrants' behaviors and attitudes regarding educational achievement are influenced by the group of which they belong to, and by institutions in which society at large, and the various social contexts they're embedded in. So, our second panelist is Idil Abdul. By the way, who's heard Idil on CBC yesterday? Just a show of hands. We have some Idil fans there. All right. Idil's a teacher at Woodruff High School and an avid youth worker. She's been teaching at Woodruff for the last 5 years and has worked at Pinecrest Queensway prior to that. She's been working with youth in a variety of programs, including camps, homework clubs, for the past 10 years in our community. Bashir Mohammed, I'm really happy to see him. Bashir was one of the youngest guys when we did a basketball league called Somali Youth Basketball League, and now, mashallah, he's a graduate of the University of Ottawa in the education program. Bashir immigrated to Canada with his family at the tender age of 2 in 1991, after fleeing the civil war in Somalia. He's the youngest member of his family, and he graduated with an undergraduate degree at Carleton University with Law, Policy, and Government, and he recently obtained his Bachelor's of Education at the University of Ottawa. Bashir has also worked with youth for the last 10 years, and most recently has worked with youth in the jail. So in one of the jails in Ottawa, he was an inmate visitor and an inmate youth council. So we're looking forward to hearing from a wide variety of perspectives here. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Filson, who is our first panelist tonight.
I don't think we're going to talk for a lot. What we wanted to do was kind of engage with you guys. Can you guys all hear me? Yeah? Okay. So I'll just jump right into it. As Sheikh Saeed mentioned, you kind of got, well, either you have already personal knowledge about some of the barriers Somali youth encounter, and if you don't, you did hear about some of the challenges that we, as a Somali community and our youth, face in the education system. So the more I personally study this topic, the more I kind of, the educational attainment, identity formation, the incorporation patterns of racialized Black children in Canada, the more I come to the realization that, these educational disparities, these type of issues are very, very complex, and I think you can't really look at it from one angle. You have to really, in order to gain a deeper understanding of these issues, you have to look at the interconnected factors such as the individual, interpersonal, institutional, and macro level factors that lead to not only the poor educational outcomes, but also higher educational achievement, because there are a lot of youth that are actually doing well. So we need to look at the other side of it as well in order to get a better understanding of the educational achievement of Somali youth living in Canada. So there have been many solutions that have been proposed to solve the problem of underachievement of Somali Canadians. Some focus on the individual level. So for instance, Kareem talked about motivational issues, more like, identity formation, skill development, really at that level. Some other initiatives focus on increasing parental involvement, engaging the Somali community. Some focus on community-based initiatives, such as pathways to education. And some initiatives are really school-focused. So they aim to create, more inclusive schools and curriculum, and to kind of establish better relationships between teachers and students, for instance. While I think all these type of initiatives are very important, I personally believe that the problem of educational underachievement of racialized Black youth, such as Somalis, is a systemic issue. So I think it's beyond the individual. I think it's beyond even, the family level and the community level. And therefore, what I think is what we need to do is really look at the structural reasons our youth are underachieving, and Sheikh Saeed really talked about some of these things, like low income and other systems of oppression. So what we do, so that's what I focus on personally, the macro level of analysis. We need to really strive to eliminate structural racism, not only attacking the issue of underachievement at the individual, family and community level, for instance. What this does is, it puts the blame really on sometimes on the individual. It victimizes individuals. Although we know that there are larger reasons, when you see 74% of students are underachieving, that's beyond the individual. There are systemic issues that we need to examine. So that's what I think. We need to look at the larger mainstream discourse. We need to look at larger and systemic issues that place racialized groups such as Somalis in marginalized positions in society and privilege a dominant group. So some people are privileged in society. You really have to talk about that. And they have it a lot easier. And other groups are at a disadvantage going into the system. So without examining that, we're not going to have a more just society. So I think it's up to us as a Somali community to demand change. No one's going to give up their privilege. We have to make sure and challenge the dominant discourse. So I guess I'll just open with that. That's okay.
Thanks, Wilson. Thanks for really opening this dialogue up. We were hoping to get a wide variety of panelists because we wanted the panelists to cover a wide variety. So we chose an academic like Filson so she can just talk about the broader topic. Now we'll get into a bit more detail and have Idil kind of elaborate on her day-to-day as what she sees in the education system as a teacher. So Idil?
So I had a plan, I had a speech, I talked about it, me and Hoya have been driving to work every day discussing it, and then I saw the numbers, the statistics, and so I think that's kind of out the window. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the statistics and give some insight about things I'm seeing in the classroom. So alhamdulillah, I've been at Woodruff High School, this is my 5th year. I teach math. I've taught a course called Designing Your Future a few times. So it's a course about life planning. It's kind of the senior version of careers. So how to do an interview and how to do phone interview, how to write a resume, how to find an apartment, how to find a car, all those kind of things. And so it's been interesting working with that population. A lot of times it's kids who just need credits, kids who just need to get out of high school. And they're the kids who are learning these life skills that are necessary. So I'd like to talk about two groups: high achievers in our community, the Somali kids who are doing well, succeeding, making it to university comfortably and college comfortably as well, and just very briefly, and then talk about the students who are struggling. And so for the students who are struggling, I think the numbers, I had kind of some long-term strategies, but I think realistically, the way the numbers are bearing out, it's shocking, and we need to think about what we can do now, and sometimes that stuff isn't as nice and flowery, and sometimes it's just about recognizing that we're at a deficiency right now where we're fighting uphill a little bit. And in terms of long-term, there's some nicer things as well. So for the high achievers, the students in our community who are doing very, very well, it's really important that they get in extracurricular activities. Because we have a lot of bright students in our community, and they're scoring 90s, and they're scoring 80s, and they're doing very well. But there aren't a lot of Somali kids represented in the clubs, in student council. They play basketball, but they don't play any other sports. I played high school basketball, and it's what we do. It's what we need to let kids try new things. And the purpose of that is not just for fun, but for boys, it structures their time outside of school. That's incredibly important. We all know the problem of boys having unstructured time. So for boys, number one, just emergency planning type of solution, it structures their time. It gives them an important sense of self. It gives them a sense of self-efficacy. That's why extracurriculars are really important. And I think our community, a lot of immigrant communities don't value this. And because we're coming from a place of struggle, we're coming from a place that we want to succeed and we want to get 90s and 80s, of course it's very important. But the secret of the communities that are really succeeding is that their kids are not just going to school. If they're going to Saturday language schools, like the Chinese students, they're going to Saturday language schools and they're really learning their language. They're not going and having fun only. They're going and they're reading and they're writing in Chinese, and students who speak Punjabi and students who speak Urdu, they have rigorous Saturday schools. If they're going to be doing clubs and sports, they take them seriously and they're performing at a high level. And so for students that are overachieving, it means they have a capacity. We need to challenge them and push them to that capacity. We need to keep their mind busy. We need to not just give them, a pat on the back for getting a 90. There's a lot of students who are doing very well in school and they're still engaging in very destructive behaviors in their free time, within our community and without. And I think anyone who's gone to public school knows that there are, the kids on the student council or whoever are doing very, very well, but also spend a lot of their time doing really unproductive things. So for high-achieving kids, we need to challenge them as much as possible. Get them into an art program, get them into a sports program, get them into the debate team, the international affairs club, whatever it is, challenge them. If you see they're doing well, that means they have time and energy on their hands. Push them. So for the kids that are struggling, one thing, a big difference I've noticed in the Somali community, the kids who are struggling, the kids who are really succeeding, is literacy. And this also is what separates us from other communities, is that the kids who are succeeding are reading on their free time. They're reading books they want to read for fun, even if it's just novels, even if they're just fiction. They read a lot more than the kids who are struggling. Across the board in every community, but especially in our community, 74% of our students are not meeting grade level. That means they have poor literacy skills. There is no way, the high school system, it's not that difficult that if you are a literate, very literate child, you should not be dropping below. This is the average. They're not asking at 80%, they're asking for a 70% provincial average. That's about literacy. And so it's not just about English class. If you have poor literacy skills, that's going to affect your ability to cope with the word problems in math class. And that means that you're not going to get the high-level thinking, and you're never going to get those 80s and 90s, because that's where all high-level thinking is, that's where the marks are coming from. It means you can't self-teach. It means when you're studying later, you might not understand your notes. It means you can't go on the internet and self-teach and really understand a project you're doing or a theme, or if you didn't understand the teacher's notes, you won't understand the things that are on the internet as well to help you. It means that when you're communicating, you can't communicate as well because you have a smaller vocabulary, because you're less literate. It affects every form of your learning and communication. So kids need to be reading, and that's one of the biggest differences between the high-achieving students and the struggling students. And it also, a lot of students in immigrant populations, they don't have a foundation of reference points. So if they're in class and they see a word problem about a farm silo, what is a farm silo? How am I going to find the volume of what is a silo? It's a cylindrical thing. It's a cylinder. It's the big grain thing. But you don't have the vocabulary. You don't work at a farm. You don't live on a farm. You're never going to see that. But if you're reading and you're exposed to things that are different, you'll have different points of references. It'll give them a way to access what they learned in different courses, like history and that kind of thing. So literacy is a really big thing. I feel like I got stuck on that point, so I'm going to keep it moving. Okay, so for struggling students, literacy is a long-term plan. That just if you have children now who are before 8th grade, this is really the time to drill them. Make sure they're reading at least 2 books a month if they're reading novels and chapter books. If they're not reading novels, make them read every week a book if they're reading little picture books and that kind of thing. They need to be reading on their spare time outside of the assigned reading school is giving them. That's just long-term strategies. Immediate strategies. So we have 74% of our students have been identified as on some kind of special education. And so one thing that, as a teacher, that I understand that a lot of people don't, is there's a stigma that comes with that in the community, but there's also a benefit to that. And it's something I've noticed a lot of the students who are gifted, or a lot of the students who have very involved parents, they want their kids to get tested. Because if your child gets tested, and the school, sometimes teachers will recommend it, and many immigrant communities always refuse the test. It's very hard to get them to buy into the test because of the stigma. And it might have been this way when I was growing up and classes were segregated. But now that we have integrated classes and all the students are integrated together, having a test, and if your child is not formally identified with a learning disability, they still may get some legal benefits. And this is emergency strategies. This is not something that we like to do, but this is the benefit of having the test. If you are tested and it says that you need longer time to process, that's not going to show up on your report card. It's not going to lower your grade. It means that when you are writing a test, you'll get time and a half, and you might get to write in a quiet room. So a lot of the parents who are very, very involved, if they notice their child has been struggling since elementary school, they'll demand the test in high school. Because they know if the student gets tested, they'll have accommodations. They'll get an extra copy of the notes. They'll get, some students get extra copies of the notes. Some students get alternate spaces to write in that are quiet. Some students get oral testing, so that if they are having a rough time with the test, they circle the questions they don't understand, and someone reads the question to them to help them understand the question. They might get a scribe if their handwriting is poor. So in terms of, if you have a student now who is struggling in high school, and someone suggests a test for them, professional opinion, and the opinion of most of the teachers is, let them get the test. It's not going to stigmatize them in the classroom. The number of students, I have classes, academic classes, where 1/3 of the students have an IEP, an individualized education plan, which means they have been tested, and I have a series of notes that are legal obligations for me. I have to give this person extra time. I have to give this person a copy of the notes. If this person wants to write in a quiet room, I have to let them write in a quiet room. And these are students that go to university, and now the universities recognize the IEPs. And you can go to your university and say, I need a quiet place to write. I need a copy of the notes. And the university programs will provide that for you. So if you have a student now who is struggling with their literacy in high school, it's not too late to take advantage of the programs that the schools offer. Obviously, it's not ideal, but the testing, if they don't have a learning disability, no one's going to write learning disability on their paper. They'll say not formally identified, but you might get extra time. You might get copies. You might get all of those things. So it's really important for us to know that the system can be used in our favor, and it's not only to marginalize us. And other communities who are not marginalized, mainstream communities, white Canadians, are accessing these. Students who are gifted get extra time on their tests because they get to show the range of their abilities. Students with very poor handwriting, very smart students with very poor handwriting, so it takes them longer to finish a test. So they get tested. If they meet some standard, they get twice as long to write the test, and they don't have to take notes in class. They get a copy of the notes. They may be students in the 70s, 80s. I had a student in the 90s who had this accommodation. So short-term strategy for students who are struggling, if there is a testing offered, I think it's important. Literacy is very important. That might be the root of their problem. For a lot of students who are struggling in high school now, the root of their problem is literacy. A lot of parents want to get math tutors for their kids. That is the only kind of tutoring I see parents ever get for their students. Get someone who's going to make your child read. Get a tutor who makes them read and listens to them, make them read out loud, do comprehension activities. That's the kind of tutoring we need. Whereas math is rote skills, the teachers offer a lot of help with that. There's Khan Academy on YouTube. They might not need a math teacher, they might need a literacy coach, they might need someone, even if it's a university student who took a social science, that's a good enough university as a literacy coach for them, and unless you want to get someone. and making the most of the applied. 35% of our students are in the applied stream. When I saw that number, I was shocked at how low it was, because I thought a lot more of our kids were in applied. What I'm seeing though in the academic stream is that even the Somali students who are in the academic stream are the lower performing, they are the lower performing kids in the class. So it's not about the designation of applied or academic. It's about your ability. So there are kids who are going to be going to university, but they might be going to study some social science, and they might take applied math all the way through because they want to keep their average high. That's about playing the system and understanding the benefits, and that's like knowing the benefits of the test or in getting the IEP. So in terms of the applied stream, I wouldn't be too scared about the applied. Like the Sheikh was telling us, the danger about the applied is not applied classes. It's the cohort of kids who are in the applied classes. It's that when people give up on kids, they make them go into applied. So if your student really is functioning at applied level, don't fight to get them into the academic level. Fight to get them a 90 into the applied, and then next year, switch them into academic. So it's about recognizing where we are now and making the most of it, as opposed to a lot of parents fight the system, and of course you're going to fight it if you feel like your child's being marginalized, but there's ways we can use it to our advantage. So if your child's all applied now, let them take all applied now, make sure they're getting 90s in their applied, make sure they're getting 80s in their applied, and then switch them later. There's always an opportunity to switch. There's always something you can do. It might be a 2-week-long summer course. It might be an intermediate course. If they have to repeat it, they have to repeat it. It's better to get out of high school in 4.5 years or 5 years and understand it and be able to go to university than it is to get out in 4 years and not qualify for anything. So I'm sorry if it took a negative tone. Sorry if I went over my time. But the numbers were so shocking. And I think we need to think long-term, but as it stands right now, we have to react to these numbers and we have to do something about them.
Thank you, Adil. I think these are really good practical ways, and I'm happy that you kind of elaborated a bit about the IEPs, because in the community there's this huge stigma. I've worked in the community for the last 10 to 12 years or so, and you can't imagine the number of parents that come to me with problems with IEPs, and understanding this a little better. And I think there are positive ways that we can use things like the IEPs and ways that we can use the system. Thanks again as well for talking and elaborating a bit more about the high-functioning youth in our community and extra ways to get them involved. Sports are good, but what about the other clubs, right? So again, we have Bashir here who's going to be talking. We get the opportunity to work, like I was saying a little earlier, in the jails. And he's also worked with a number of youth groups. So it's really alarming, the 58% of dropout rates for males, and maybe kind of talk about what are some of the things that you see, and maybe some solutions as well, because the other part of Awakening is to highlight a challenge, but to also talk about some opportunities to address these challenges.
Assalamu alaikum. Rabbi اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, dear brothers and sisters, thank you for coming out in this very cold evening and having me on this panel. Jazakallah khair. I'd like to speak from my experience working with youth and around Ottawa for a few years. I really enjoyed the presentation by our very dear Sheikh Saeed and my two sisters on the panel with me. I would like to just give my experience of what I feel is some characteristics we need to engender in our youth in order to make them successful. I mean, we all know we face many barriers and obstacles, and I would like to talk today about wellness. In Somali, it's called Afimat. So I hope to get a picture here. I don't know if the picture is up. As a teacher, we like to look at stuff. So, but if it's not here, it's okay. I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna try to make the picture with my hands. So I think this topic came to me when I was a student in Ottawa University. I was in a practicum in one of the schools. There was a one-day workshop of activities and seminars about wellness, which I led one activity, and I really focused on. was interested, and I was reflecting on the directions the schools are going with the elementaries and the high schools. I don't have much experience, and maybe the sisters can talk more about that. But wellness is it's a focus now in the schools. In my experience working with Somali youth in recreational education and mentoring programs, it stood out to me the importance to educate youth on wellness. I learned that the young Somali youth need to understand how to practice healthy living habits in order to succeed in school and all of their endeavors. The age of 13 to 22 are a phase of great change, and educating youth to be well is very important in determining their future success. Every community has components of wellness. The Aboriginal communities, the larger communities. I want to contextualize this in a Somali, from a Somali perspective. I want to speak about Afimat from 5 components. Emotional, physical, social, environmental, spiritual, and mental. Social skills are the ability to engage positively with peers, family, and in the larger community. Physical fitness habits are developing and maintaining physical activity throughout life. Spiritual involvement means going to the mosque and completing the 5 pillars of Islam. While I worked in abroad for a few months, I was fortunate to listen to a brief training by the Islamic Studies coordinator. I was fascinated how Sister Dina advocated that we implement Islam in all of the core subjects. I found it very interesting that she was referencing from American universities in the field of education, and from the message I got, it stated that young students with spiritual involvement are well equipped to overcome challenges and are more resilient. While I worked at Richmond High School as a youth worker in 2011, a co-worker and I were busy answering questions students had about Islam instead of tutoring them in their core subjects, because that was something that got them to talk and open up. Also, emotional intelligence is allowing students to both understand and manage their anger, sadness, and excitement. Finally, it is important to support the cognitive development of youth at school, at home, and in the community. We need to instill in youth a passion for lifelong learning, not just learning because they are forced to. Over the years, I came across youth that wanted to learn because it was internalized and were motivated to achieve good grades and graduate from post-secondary school. Most of the time, there were role models in their life that inspired them to do so. Students that did not learn these crucial life skills or struggled with 2 or more of those components were more likely to have problems in school or to enter the criminal justice system. When I worked in the Ottawa Carleton Detention Center, I wrote a needs assessment, and the #1 need identified for the young men in the detention center was the importance of developing spiritual programs in the detention center to address challenges these young men face, mainly caused by unhealthy living habits. When we're out in the community, very rarely do we seek out the imams or the sheikhs and we ask them for help and advice. But in the jails, in the times of crisis, they seek out the imams and the sheikhs. So it really sent out a message to me, the importance of spirituality. And so these men were seeking something that they didn't take advantage of when they were outside. And another issue that I wrote in the needs assessment is a big problem that caused these young men to enter the criminal justice system was addiction, mental health and addiction, particularly alcohol and drugs and substance abuse. These are some issues we need to talk about in the communities, in the schools. We send our youth and children to school, but there's also education. Schooling is learning the core subjects. Education is instilling character and healthy living habits for these youth so they can be equipped to challenge the difficulties and challenges they face. I hope I'm good for time. I'm just going to wrap up. as I mentioned, I actually, on a more serious note, mental health and addiction is something I've seen in very many occasions. I even remember my high school experience. I remember I just left the washroom and all I hear is something like a huge bang. I come back to the washroom. I see a youth that just walked out, and and there was like a beer bottle that was thrown in the toilet, right? So these are some stuff that I've seen live, and we cannot. This is an issue. I feel that if students are addicted to drugs and alcohol, they are not going to be equipped to deal with the challenges or they face or even graduate from university. I mentioned earlier that wellness is a vehicle that drives youth to succeed. Every single one of us can be role models or mentors to youth or young Somalis to develop a balanced, full life. From my experience, students that receive such support to fully live all the components of wellness are more likely to succeed and overcome challenges. Every single one of us can understand the importance of maintaining health towards achieving life goals. I feel it should be the central focus in addressing problems that our youth face in the schools and the community. I'm greatly thankful to family members. Some of them are here. Mahmoud Elmi, friends, Shamarke, the community here that started the awakening. I'm very deeply thankful to every single person that came through my life. I mean, schooling is one thing, but education is your lifelong experience. And what I've seen here in the community in Ottawa is that there are a lot of people that will pull you up when you need it. And also to individuals, especially individuals that know what's bothering you before you can even tell them to provide you such support. Inshallah, I look forward to working with any one of you, any one of the brothers and sisters that are here that has an idea to monitor, track, and enhance the wellness of Somali youth in Ottawa. Jazakumullah khairan for listening.
All right, so just to get the conversation flowing, I'll ask one question to maybe get you guys started off, and any of you three can answer, or maybe you three all have an opinion on this. Now, in the city of Ottawa, we have an abundance of homework clubs, regardless of where you live. So if you're in the West End, if you're in the South, downtown, we have a huge number of homework clubs. What are the role of homework clubs in our community, enhancing not just the community level, but the individual, and maybe making or building a bridge between the schools? Because oftentimes, my experience working in the community, teachers, the school system has no idea that there is great programming locally in each of these communities. So what's the role, what role do you see for homework clubs in our communities?
From my experience, I think Sister Filson or Idil was referencing the Pathway program. I mean, when you send a kid, your youth or your kid to a homework club, you're only helping them with the subjects math, English, and that's, to be quite honest, that's what they came for. That's a good thing. However, students just don't face problems with their school. They need advocacy, they need social support, they need mentoring, they need economic support, and the list goes on. So unless the homework clubs can address those issues, I mean, we are faced with obstacles now which, just tutoring will not solve it. I mean, there are some great homework clubs across Ottawa, and I have very great respect for the people that developed it and worked hard for it. But now, there is a growing support for the Pathway model, and more communities, I feel, should implement it. And I'm hearing around the communities that some low-income neighborhoods and schools are going to develop the Pathway program, because I've heard a lot of success stories from there, where student support workers go to the schools and they advocate for the students, they help them with their tutoring, they give them economic support, they help them with all the challenges that they need. So, Jazakumullah khairan. Those are just, I think we need to expand the capacity of homework clubs to serve more needs, and I think we need to have those models spread across Ottawa, especially in areas where schools are having high dropout rates?
I think homework clubs are very, very important, and they should be supported because they provide students that can't, get help from their parents or from the school assistance. Even those that I see that live in Barhaven and that kind of stuff, they actually go to low-income communities to go to these homework clubs. So I think they're very, very important, and they play an important role. I think they should be assisted in that. We should give them more resources, because one of the challenges I've seen at these homework clubs is there's a lot of students and not many tutors. So I think, in order for it to be effective, sometimes what I see is, students will come there to get the answers, and the tutor doesn't really have time to give every student one-on-one support. So I really think that we should support these programs and try and get more resources and more tutors and more funding. So that's a really big issue. A lot of even parents, Somali parents, I've seen in these helping out in these homework clubs, work extra hours and go above and beyond. So I really commend the people who work in these homework clubs, and I encourage those who have the skills, and for us who actually have post-secondary credentials, to go out and volunteer even to work at these homework clubs.
So I wanted to just touch upon one thing Philson said and one thing Bashir said. And as someone who is a long-time homework club worker, it's a hard job. It's not, and anyone who works in a homework club knows, it's not an easy place to work. The kids necessarily don't always get the help. They're very underfunded. And so it's a very real problem. And ideally, it would be great if they could do more. Like, I think that's an amazing aspiration. But as is, we're not meeting the needs of the kids. So funding is huge. Volunteering. There are parents who volunteer. The homework club at Ridgemont working there. There are parents who come in and while their children are working, they help their children. They help other students. Because a lot of times kids come and they need someone to read out loud with them, and they need someone to sign a thing saying they read 10 pages. So parents come. The parents that come, that would be amazing. If you are a parent who can come and help, that is an amazing use of your time. If you're an older sibling and you have to drive your younger sibling, or you have to walk them over, hang out for an hour. Sit with them. Sit with someone in grade 2 or grade 3 who needs someone to read. That way the kids in grade 10 and 11 can get real help with their math homework or their language homework or whatever it is. So if you have time and you're going to be in there anyway, give up an hour of your time. It would be great. There are parents doing this, and they are an amazing resource. And it adds something to the culture of the homework club as well. It makes it a nicer place. In the places where there isn't parent involvement, and there aren't enough staff, rather, kids can't focus. Kids are allowed. The kids a lot of times who are going to the homework club are kids who can't focus during the day when they go to school. And so it's a mix of students who genuinely need help and are trying in the daytime and just can't get help at home. Maybe they're in senior level math and science courses, whatever it is. And then there's kids who can't focus all day for whatever other reason, haven't been paying attention in class all day, don't really understand what they're supposed to do, and show up and say, help me with my homework. And there's 2 staff and there's 20 kids. So funding is, I think, the #1 issue. It's not enough that we drop our kids off and we leave them. There's not enough staff there to really help them. And like Wilson said, when you get in that tough position, they're just going to give them the answer or say, okay, try these 2 steps and then you'll get it, or here's a trick to get it. But they're not getting a broader understanding of it. They're not getting proper tutoring. And the Pathways program, Shimake mentioned something about how well the teachers connect, the teachers don't know what's going on. We have no idea what's going on in any of the homework clubs except for Pathways. And Pathways is not a homework club. It's a multi-dimensional support system. It's economic support, and it's tutoring, and it's mentoring, and it's social support. It's an amazing program in the West End. If you qualify, go. It's amazing. But again, it's not a homework club. It's providing them with a lot of different things. So homework clubs are not enough. Go, volunteer. We need to get funding. If we're going to advocate for something, advocate for homework clubs, because our kids are accessing them. We're accessing them a lot.
Thank you. I'm also mindful of the time, so maybe 2 or 3 questions. So I see Shelby up here.
I actually was a homework club worker for several years, and I would actually agree that, just as a statement, that we maybe need to create more systemic programs where we actually can actually monitor the achievements of the homework clubs. Also, because they're working with the kids before they get to high school, and frankly, a lot of the damage is done in elementary school. So again, I just want to make a statement first. For 2 years in a row now, I've actually been a speaker at a diversity day for the Ottawa Cross District School Board, and the story I share is my story of going to Pinecrest High School and not being able to read. I was reading at grade 2 level by grade 8. And the only way I eventually ended up getting really good at reading was when I dropped out of school for 2 years at the age of 13. My mom's white, you know, French-Canadian, going back generations. At the time I was going to school, it was mostly a white school. There's a lot of us have French-Canadian kids running around, but the reason why and the way my mother was treated, the way that I was treated at that school in the 90s was because of the neighborhood we came from, because we lived in poverty, because my mother was on welfare. So the point I'm trying to make is that, yes, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of systemic racism, but you know, I'll be honest with you, if you probably did a study and looked at white kids living on welfare and these kinds of stuff, you probably found that their rates are even lower than the Somali community. Because unfortunately, a lot of the parents aren't advocating. Like my mom didn't finish high school, and when she even was asking the school about what was going on, they said, well, you didn't finish high school, what would you know? So I guess the point I'm trying to make for everyone here is that this is a systemic issue. It's really serious, because Pinecrest School is still one of the worst schools in Eastern Ontario. This is really serious, and it's something that I've always been inspired by how much the Somali community has taken it on, but you guys are taking something on that unfortunately has been going on even before you even came to the country, and needs to have further advocacy going on. It needs to be something, frankly, everyone should be concerned about. The second point I want to make is that you're high achievers. I just want to make a point, again, these are kind of points, but it's important. Please mentor your high achievers. And I mean, even by the time they graduate from high school. It's another thing that keeps happening, it's a systemic thing. Everyone thinks, well, they graduated from high school, they're in university now, everything's fine. How many of you here did not finish university on time? Right? Straight up. A lot of us struggle. I haven't finished university yet, and I'm not Somali, but I was a high achiever. The big thing that happens, particularly coming from low-income neighborhoods, I think as soon as you got to university, you're fine. When you get to university, you need a lot of mentorship. The University of Ottawa, you know, they created a really good mentorship program, so they realized, you know what, a lot of kids are not doing well as soon as they get to university. It's hard. It's not only because academically you might not have been properly prepared because you went to a really crappy school, and a 90 at one school is not the same as a real 90. It's also hard because, frankly, to be the only black kid, or to be the only Muslim kid, or to be the only kid from your background in a certain program sucks. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. So, like, right? So again, I think that's the point I want to make, is that I see, and I find myself, even though I didn't graduate university, I'm mentoring a lot of people who, so I just want to put that out there for everyone here, is that don't think, okay, they finish high school, they're in university, everything's done, because a lot of people are struggling. And I guess the last point I want to make is that I think we need to do more work with the boys, talking to them. I know there's a lot of focus on, like, boys need to play basketball, and boys need to do sports. I'm somebody, again, as a youth worker, your boys need to sit down and talk. The big thing, no, I'm straight up, okay? I mean, I used to run a girls program. I used to run a girls program. The boys always be like, why is there no boys chat? But I'm like, but for my other work that I've done with boys, I'm just like, I'm straight up, your boys got a lot to say. Like, I'm writing up an interview right now with a young man who came to us to Muslim Link, okay, Energy for Muslim Link. And I was like, I want to tell you my story of getting out of being in a gang. And the stuff that he broke down for me, I'm just like, pouring out his soul, right? And I think, unfortunately, you know, again, even in the Muslim community, we have a lot of gender-sacred stuff, but I don't really know if we have spaces where we're just like, can we just straight up sit and talk about what's going on? Because the biggest thing that I've found interesting that's happened to the Somali community, again, I remember even as a mixed-race little haired black kid when the Somalis first started coming in, because again, I remember when you guys first showed up, I was like, there's black people, but I've never seen black people like that before, I don't understand. They're from Africa, what? You know, and then you guys saw me and were like, what is this little black kid in this movie here? Come here with a poor kid. But basically, the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of your boys, they've absorbed this weird thing that you'll find in a lot of other black young men, a lot of other men who grow up in poverty. There's actually, like, to be a man is to not do well in school. Like, I've actually had boys like mess with this other kid who's doing well. It's like, what are you, gay? You're doing well in school. What are you, white? You're doing well in school. Like, somehow it becomes inauthentically, you know, gangsta to do well in school. And I think we have to understand, again, it goes back to the psychology in your head. Some of our kids are being held back by actual peer pressure. So we need to create more spaces where they can actually just talk and work this out. So anyway, I'm just sharing, but I'd love to hear people's thoughts on what I said.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience. We appreciate it. I think you talked about a lot of issues, and I guess I'll touch upon only two of them, and then maybe you guys can talk about other points that you made. The first one, again, I am of the view that this is a systemic issue. So therefore, for instance, I'll give you an example. In the mid-90s, so in 92, the Royal Commission on Learning declared there is a crisis among Black youth with respect to education and achievement. So that was before our youth were even growing up, and this was, I think, in reference to the Afro-Caribbeans in Toronto. So this is an issue that has been around before the Somalis even came here. So we need to realize, and still the system hasn't done anything about it. The stats have more or less remained the same, and I think the system fails our youth. I don't think it's the youth that are failing. And a lot of the youth that are succeeding, they're very driven, and I think they find out how the system operates and how to get around it. And I'll give you an example of one of the youth that I was interviewing. She said, for instance, she had a 3-year plan to graduate high school early. She went to our guidance counselor, and the first one she was okay. You know, she said, oh, okay, I guess. You know, she signed her reach ahead forms and that kind of stuff. The second year, what happened was there was a new guidance counselor, and she was like, no, I really think this is a bad idea, and she wasn't supportive. But the student didn't stop there. She said, okay, that's fine. She left her, and she kept on coming back until that guidance counselor wasn't there that was assigned to her because it's by, you know, last name. And then she went to another guidance counselor, and then she got all her signed form to do her reach ahead and go along with her plan. So a lot of these kids, they find out how the system works, that there are barriers in the system, and they're able to kind of maneuver around it because they're very goal-oriented. So and a lot of them say, you know, the system never helped me. And guess what? The system is good for those who are smart. So once they realize that you're actually not like the rest of the racialized blacks, they'll be like, okay, fine. They'll allow you to kind of go on. You're the success story. They need to have a couple of those, right? To highlight that it's not the system that's failing, but look, there are achievers there. So there are opportunities for those who are smart, but I don't think there are opportunities for those who are weak and that have literacy. They will not survive. It is very difficult to survive in this type of hostile environment. And also a lot of students that are doing well, I think there are self-starters, and they're able to go online, learn by themselves, but there's not a lot of help that they're receiving from the system. And the second point that you were talking about was the university, the transition from high school to university. I've noticed a lot of youth, they have a lot of support when they're in high school. You know, the parents, they put them in 100, when they're in grade 11, yeah, that's when they get serious. Grade 9 and 10, they can fool around. Grade 11 and 12 rolls around. You know, the parents, they run around with them, 100 tutors, go to homework club, and the students motivate to get to university. Once they get there, though, they're kind of lost because they don't have all that support that they had, and sometimes they will get depressed or whatever, or they will drop out in the first year. So you need to kind of think about these issues, and we do need that transition. We can't kind of, take away all the support all of a sudden, although it gets even more difficult. I think what we need to do is, just to wrap up, I think I'm taking too much time, I think it's to kind of build students that are self-sufficient and that they can learn and they are resilient, exactly. And it starts with, again, building the basic skills. Once you have strong literacy skills, you're okay. And it's the point that I want to make. So.
I just want to jump on two things that Philson and Shelby said. Mentorship and support. It's so important. And just touching again on something Bashir said, for mental health and wellness as well. The psychological strain and emotional strain it is of being the only person of your kind, the only person that looks like you, and then the cultural pressure and the community pressure of, mashallah, you are the one Somali police officer. You are our teacher. You are our one-time teacher. You're doing your PhD. There's a lot of pressure that comes along with that. So if you are by yourself, the mentorship, it's exhausting. People do get depressed. People do get lost. And those tricks about knowing the system, how do you know the system? You can sit and watch other people do it. But what's the shortcut? It's having someone who's already done it to talk to. And so, for example, Philson helped me apply for graduate school. I'm helping someone else apply for something. Alhamdulillah, I have a mother who's done things in the community that a lot of other people have done, and I can ask her about them. So the kids who are succeeding are kids who are watching sharply what the other people are doing and copying the successful behaviors. But it's not fair that we're expected to be that shrewd. It's not fair that we're expected to be that high-performing just to make it out of high school properly. So mentorship is incredibly important so you can share your experiences, and even the difficult experiences. Like racism is real, discrimination is real. And so even if we're not in a time where people have laws that are barring us from things, the emotional and psychological strain of those things, but people assuming you're a bad kid. What are you doing here? What are you doing in the gym? That kind of thing. The strain of that, why then try to be a good kid if everyone thinks you're a bad kid? Why, just by the way you look, if people are going to assume things about you, it gets exhausting every day to have to prove it wrong. And so again, it's different depending on where you are. It is about the individual, but the numbers we're seeing of kids who are succeeding, they're outliers. They would succeed in any circumstance. There are people who have support networks and have natural, God-given abilities, mashallah, that they're going to succeed. But it's not fair that only those people get to succeed. The majority in the normal curve should be succeeding. It shouldn't just be the outliers. So there are systemic things. Mentorship is a big thing to help us get out of that.
I have a question. I think I'm going to direct it to Filson because I feel that when you started, you just gave an introduction to what you wanted to talk about more. And I'm interested in the systemic issues because I think as much as we work hard as individuals, there are challenges that are bigger than us. And I'm going to quote one of my favorite people here in Ottawa is Adrian Harewood. He's a TV host, and I heard him once say, it's either we break down the doors and the barriers and we get into this system, or we create a parallel system that works for us. So from your studies and your research, have you come across publications or studies in other countries where black people in minority situations, so like North America or Europe, have been able to successfully take on the system and navigate and make it work for their people too? Because so far, we all try different efforts here and there, but it doesn't seem to go as far. Like I remember from 1993 when I was in high school, and people were talking about similar challenges, and there were people who were working and trying to do a lot of things. And it seems like we're reinventing the wheel every day, and same damn challenge. Like the people who were in elementary school, high school at that time, who are parents today, are having the same challenge with their children. So I'm optimistic. I want to see a change. Have you come across things that work? And if so, tell us so that we can work on it. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that question. That's a very, important question, and it's very loaded. So I guess I'll talk about the literature first. A lot of the literature, it has the same trends. So if you look at Europe, the only difference is the context is very different. So Europe, they have like an assimilation type of framework that like youth are actually expected to adopt the European culture and that kind of stuff. In Canada, it's a little bit more unique because we have the multicultural, approach to handling the integration of immigrants. But the trends are the same wherever you look because these societies are all organized by racial hierarchy. So you do have, those who are racialized as white at the top, and you have those who are, racialized black at the bottom. So the trends are the same. Wherever you look, you have those who are racialized as black are underachieving. And then those other groups like the Chinese and the Indians are actually overachieving. And then the benchmark is those who are racialized as white, the third plus generation. But one thing that I'm critiquing in the literature is that this group, this black racialized group, is usually treated as a homogeneous group. So what we need to do is, and this is the gap in the literature, we need to break this group down and see if there are other racialized groups that are actually doing well. So it's a gap in the literature, so we don't really know yet. But what we do know is why these other groups are actually doing well. All immigrants have the same, a dual frame of reference, that they come to a new country and they want their children to succeed, and education plays a very important role because they realize that it leads to social mobility. But the only difference is that, we came as refugees, and other groups, they had social capital, they had financial capital, and they have strong communities to help all their members. Those who have, the resources, and those that don't, they have a collective mentality where they help each other out. So there are things that we see, like culture is a big thing. There's a link between education and identity. So the first one is those who can actually access the white middle class philosophy, and they can read about it and try to acquire that culture. They will, they will succeed. most of them. But a lot of our youth, they won't gain entry into that kind of group, the white middle class. So what they'll do is kind of integrate into a subclass, and that's why you have them going to gang culture and that kind of stuff. But the best form, they said, is that if we can get our kids at least to adopt our culture, it's not or religion or whatever it is. The importance here is to form a connection with our parents. So therefore, we can adopt their dual frame of reference, that we can kind of at least communicate with them, have good relationships, kind of lower intergenerational conflicts and that kind of stuff in order to achieve. So there are things that we know that already work at the lower levels that I was talking about, individual community level. But for me, again, if we want any sort of systemic change, we have to attack the problem at the top. We need to mobilize as a community. We need to form partnerships with other communities that are marginalized. This is very important. It's a large issue, right? And therefore, what we have to do is, lobby, make sure that we get politically active. We have to hold these people accountable. And who are these people? We're talking about, the different elected officials. So I think that's the key to kind of, mobilize our group, lobby them, advocate for our rights, because who else is going to, put our interests at the forefront of the policy agenda? If we don't do it, no one's going to do it. So that's the thing I would say. No one can do it alone. The system's too big. We need to kind of, it might even be bigger than the Somali community, so we have to be smart about it in the way that we attack it. Sorry, Shamika, it took too long.
So I think you can see that we've sparked something tonight. I think we're not ready to end this conversation, and we hope to continue this beyond tonight, and that was the purpose, to spark something. I know there's a group of elders or leaders in the community that want to address this issue of the problems within the education system, and Sheikh Saeed's been quite active, Hawa Shafi'i, and a few people have been active, so I hope we can take some concrete steps tonight to formalize some partnerships and really address that issue at the top level. I think it'll give some really concrete ways of how important it is for mentoring. I think we have a great mentoring program here in Ottawa, Somali Youth mentoring program that's run out of the West End as well as the South. So parents or people that aren't aware of that program, if you're a professional, please give back. And thank you, Bashir. I really wanted to pick up on Shelby's point about engaging our boys and making sure that we really target and create safe spaces to have conversations beyond sports. So inshallah, I hope it sparks something with a few young men here today. As Sheikh Saeed was saying, we're always outnumbered at these events. So this is a call out to all the guys that are here tonight. That inshallah, next year's awakening, to bring a friend, to bring somebody along. And if you're a female, bring your siblings along or your partner. So I want to end there. Please join me in thanking the panelists, and thank you for your time.